Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Joining us in our studio today is someone who many Windsor residents will recognise because of his long career as a teacher and principal in our city. Windsor author David Garlick has written The Principal Chronicles. His book spins lively, engaging tales about the unusual and humorous school situations in which he's found himself. And as one fellow educator wrote, this book captures life in our schools perfectly, filled with the love and absurdity. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This was a fun read, and anyone who's ever gone to school who reads it will identify with so much.
Thank you. That was the plan.
Yeah. Now, for someone who may not know you, who may not have had anybody in your classes, tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up.
Born and grew up in Windsor, Ontario. Became a teacher in the early 1980s. And going backwards in time, I finished up my career at Walkerville. I was principal at Walkerville for the last 2 years, principal at Forster before that, principal at Western Secondary School in the county before that, vice principal at Forster, vice principal at W.D. Lowe, and then I taught at virtually every school in the city.
Wow, that's quite something. So let's go back to your growing up. And a lot of this is about relationships between, the students and the teachers. And what sort of relationships did you form when you were a schoolboy? Were there teachers and boys who sort of influenced what you were eventually to write about?
The incidents that I talk about from my teaching career, they start long before I became a teacher. I don't know how it happens. My wife's pointed out to me that things just seem to happen to me. I just seem to sort of attract situations. And that began very early on, from about the time I was 4 years old. Incidents were always happening with me, my friends from down the street, my friends in school, grade school, high school, all the way along.
Can you remember something that happened when you were 4?
I put it in the book.
Okay, tell us about it.
It's a story called Responsibility, and it starts when I get brought to school to be registered. That would have probably been in February or March, the year before you start school, and I was convinced my mother was going to drop me off and leave me there. And it was in the evening, probably 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I melted down. It was a horrible, horrible experience. I screamed, I cried. They had to drag me out of there, and they were never going to, they were never going to not bring me back to school, but they left school sort of on the back burner for all of March and April and May and June. But then in July and August, they told me, you're starting kindergarten in September. You're going to be going to school. There was a little bit of panic on my part, and I realized that if I was going to escape that, I was going to have to run away.
Of course.
And so I told my parents, I said I was going to run away and become a hobo. And at the time, when you're 5 years old, it's a very serious idea that you're going to be running away and becoming a hobo. But my parents just seemed to sort of accept it. And so the day that I ran away, my mother made me lunch. My father took me downstairs to the basement, and he got me a stick, and he got me a handkerchief, and he put my lifetime of things in the sack, and he walked me to the corner, and he said, if I were you, I would go towards the school. There's not going to be anybody there to try and convince you not to become a hobo, but it's 3 blocks away, and maybe you might want to take a break. So I got to the schoolyard, and everything my father had told me about the schoolyard was right. There was a jungle gym in the backyard, the sand pit. It was a very nice place to sit and take a break, and I ate my lunch. Then I decided to walk around the school, and I walked, and there's no one there. There were no teachers, there was no principal, there were no kids. It was just me. And as I walked around the school, I saw into each classroom, and all the classrooms looked very different. I picked out which one was the kindergarten room, and that looked like fun. And then I noticed that every classroom had the alphabet above the board, the A, B, C's. And I knew my alphabet, I knew my numbers, but my dad had said, when you're a hobo, just please make sure you write us a letter every once in a while. Let us know that you're okay. And then I realized I can't run away yet because
you can't
I don't know how to write. So I walked back home. That's the first story in the book.
It's a charming story. And, as I was reading it, I thought, I often wondered, did little boys really do that? Because you see it in the movies, Leave It to Beaver, and all these sort of sitcoms. But I thought, do little boys ever do it? And they do.
I'm surprised that they don't. I don't know that they do anymore. I think it's very difficult now for kids to run away.
Yes.
The way my parents treated the situation, to my way of thinking, was the best way. They left me on my own. I got to the school. I got to discover that the school wasn't a scary place. But if a parent did that today and let a 5-year-old boy walk by himself 3 or 4 blocks from home, left him to his own devices that long all by himself, I think you'd probably get in some trouble for that.
Yeah.
You'd have neighbors following, asking. That never happened to me. I didn't run away on a regular basis, but my parents encouraged me to go to the library, which was 8-9 blocks away. And I was doing that from 5-6 years old by myself. And I was encouraged to do that. And I never got into trouble even for running away to my grandparents' house, which was maybe 2 or 3 kilometers away.
It's a different time, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I don't think children can do that anymore.
Yeah. There were so many things, so many stories in the book, and I do want to touch on some of them. One of the things that you talk about, and I didn't know this actually happened, and if it had happened to my boys, I don't remember, when they went to the swimming pool.
Yes.
They had to go with no clothes on.
Yep, that was true. That was true throughout the province.
Is that right?
Yep, that wasn't just something that happened in Windsor.
Yep.
And anyone who was a student in the 1960s or 70s, they know that. They remember that happening. And frankly, we're kind of surprised that people don't know that's the way that things were. I think the idea was from the health unit that boys couldn't be trusted to take their swimsuits home, to take their towels home. And so rather than have wetsuits and wet towels hanging in lockers and becoming moldy and getting people sick, they just said, well, boys will swim naked. And so throughout the 60s and 70s, perhaps earlier, but no later, boys did swim naked.
Quite interesting.
Throughout Ontario.
I guess girls could be trusted. You also talk about a fellow called Eric and asking useless questions. That
story is fictional. I made
quite
that
charming.
Up. Thank you. I made that story up. He starts the class every day by asking a useless question. And it becomes entertaining for the class. It becomes entertaining for the teacher. And then one day he asks a question that is not useless. It's quite a serious question. And he asks his teacher, why is it that some people can just be so mean? And the teacher thinks something must be happening to Eric. And he says, no, it's not me and it's not any of my friends. People don't pick on, and he uses me as an example, people don't pick on Dave. Dave reads a ton, and we all respect that. They don't pick on Graham. They don't pick on Kathy. They're smart as whips. But some kids do get picked on, and I don't understand how that can happen, because none of us know. We're only 14 years old. None of us know where we're going to end up. None of us do. So you could be picking on the kid who will become the police officer who gets to pull you over. You could be picking on the next mayor of not next mayor, but the mayor of our town. You could be picking on, we're just starting out. We have no idea what we're going to be like in 15, 20 years.
It's a wonderful story to make up.
Thank you.
Now, I did laugh a lot at your story about pronouncing people's names. You have to tell us about that one.
Ooh, I've never read that one aloud. When I was working at W.D. Lowe Secondary School, students came from all over the world. And so sometimes the names were difficult to pronounce, but I worked very hard at making sure that I pronounced every name correctly. In fact, one student, Ronnie Brandicampola, Ronnie told me, he says, "Sir, you're the first person ever to pronounce my name correctly the first time." So I was very good at it. The only name I had a hard time saying in class was a young boy, and I changed it a little bit for the book. It's pronounced exactly as I'm going to spell it to you. P-H-U-C-M-E.
And M.E. is his last name.
Yes.
And that would have caused great merriment.
Oh. The fact, though, that the class was an English as a second language class, so some of the students had no idea that it was anything that would cause anyone any consternation. Mm-hmm. And it was wonderful to watch the students with that student. It was just his name. And it taught me that it was just the boy's name. And so I got used to using it. But it was fun to hear other kids using it as well.
Yes, I'm sure. So you're going along and you come to a point where you make a decision to become a teacher. What sort of things led to that final decision that I want to be a teacher?
When I was in grade 9, I was going to be a dentist. And I remember sitting in the dentist office because dentists made
ton of money.
Well, not a ton, but my mom wouldn't have to worry about me being poor. So I thought that would be a decent job. But I remember sitting in the dentist office, and I remember I had this almost out-of-body experience where he had his hands in my mouth, and I thought, I can't do that. I can't do that for the rest of my life. I can't do that for 40 years. So that career sort of went by the wayside. But I had wonderful teachers in grade 9, and grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. And they, not intentionally, but just their attitude towards me, their attitude towards their jobs, I thought this is a profession that I could do. And
then you had all these teaching years, mm-hmm. And how does one decide to be a vice principal? Is that something that you think about, or something that sort of happens to you?
I don't know if I put it in the book, to be honest, mm-hmm. But I had never planned on being a vice principal or principal. I was very happy being department head of history. I thought that was the best job ever. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure if people remember this. Near the end of the last century, W.D. Lowe went through a closing fight mm-hmm. with the school board, and it was more than 2 years of a fight. And I was in charge of student parliament, and I was one of the go-to teachers to get people involved. And so I helped organize the fight for the first year, and we did really, really well. And at the end of that year, we were granted another year of sort of the stay of execution. And at the end of that year, the principal came to me and said, both our vice principals are being promoted or transferred, and we're being cut back to one vice principal for next year. I'm going to ask the board for a half-time vice principal. Is that something you could do for me? And I loved Elver Peruso, the principal. He was one of the finest men I ever worked with. And I thought, if I say no, they're going to ask some poor schmuck from somewhere else who's never been with the kids, who hasn't been through the fight, who won't know anything about the student body. So I said, I could do a half-time. I could be a half-time vice principal. I think I could do that for you. And so he sent the letter into the board, and he showed me the letter, and all it said was, I would like a teacher like a David Garlick to be half-time. And he sent that in, I forget what month, I'll say I'll say February, early March. And there was no response from the board. And so Elver Peruzzo said, I guess that's my response. We're going to have one vice principal next year. And then at the last staff meeting of the year, Elver came running up to me and said, I just got a call from the school board. They want to talk to you. So act surprised. Like, you have to go to the school board right now and act surprised when they offer you a half-time job. And so I drove to the school board practicing. Half-time. I don't know. Could I do that? Yes, I think I could do that. So I went into the superintendent's office and she closed the door and she said, you know that Low is losing both its vice principals this year? Yes. And you know that it's being cut back to one? Yes. And you know that Mr. Peruzzo has asked for a half-time VP? And I said, yes. He showed me the letter. Oh, well, that's not going to happen. Would you consent to being Low's only vice principal next year? I had no qualifications. I had never given it any thought at all. And all of a sudden, I'm going to be a vice principal in September. So I said, I don't know. I really don't know. And I am surprised. And so I said, can I go home and ask my wife and think about it? Yep. We'll give you a day. Let us know by tomorrow, please. And as I walked from the office, I stopped and I said, if I say no, who do you go to next? And she said, we haven't given that any thought yet. And I thought, oh my God, they will ask some poor guy from the county who's never worked in a city school, who's never worked with English as a second language students. So the next day I agreed and I became a vice principal.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long were you vice principal before you became a principal?
3 years. One at Low, and then Low closed. Then they sent me to Forster, and 2 years at Forster, and then I was promoted to principal at Western Secondary School.
Did you ever regret leaving the classroom?
I've thought of it. That's not really the right word. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the word is, though.
Did you miss it?
Yes. I miss teaching the individual class. I miss teaching 25, 30 students in front of me. I got to do it occasionally. Sometimes I'd go to a teacher and ask if I could teach their class for a day. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the interaction with me and a group of kids. As a principal, though, it was me and one or two kids. And sometimes in very tension-filled situations where it was very important how I acted. And so I realized how important that both jobs, vice principal and principal, were. Mm-hmm. And they're very different than classroom teaching. Because the decisions you make can have very profound ramifications. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Were you a principal when you had Muhammad of the Split Head, which I loved? I was vice principal then. Muhammad of the Split Head and little Omar.
Yes, yes.
My wife just has to hear those names. She can be in the worst mood. She could have just burned her finger. And all I have to do is say, little Omar, and she'll smile. So those two names in particular were two very humorous situations.
Tell us about the Split Head.
Muhammad of the Split Head. So I get transferred to Forster Secondary School, vice principal. And for the first, 3 weeks of the year, nothing happened. Nothing negative at all. And I thought, this school doesn't even need a vice principal. Why am I here? This is not the right job. So I'm out front of the school, and my secretary on the walkie-talkie says, Dave, you're needed in the hallway right now. Something's happened, and there's a lot of blood. I thought, boy, a fight. Yay. This is my job. This is what I'm good at.
I'm getting paid.
So I run into the building, and I run to the corner where this incident's supposed to have happened, and two kids are sitting on either side of the hall. One kid has this almost literal goose egg on his forehead, and the other kid is just sort of dazed, and he's got this nice big cut. And blood's just pouring down his face. And there's a teacher with a bunch of paper towels trying to staunch the blood as best he can. And the two boys are apologizing to each other. and they're saying, sorry, I just didn't want to be late for class. And I was, running. I came around the corner. I'm sorry I didn't see you there. And they smacked heads. And so I grabbed them both and went down. Forrester was interesting because it had a health unit in the basement.
Yes, so right.
I just grabbed them and I told my secretary, I said, these are the two kids, call their parents, let them know that I'm taking them down to the health unit. Brought them down. And the one kid, we thought maybe there was a concussion because he was just confused. So he got upset with me when I said, you're not playing football tonight. But the other kid, he needed stitches. And so there was, as they were stitching him up, his father arrived and very, very grateful. Both sets of parents were very, very grateful for what we had done. There was no, we're going to sue you for giving my kid stitches without asking. So we got all that done. And then a number of years went by after that. And they ended up being good kids. There was never a problem with either one of them. A number of years go by, and now I'm principal back at the same school. And I get a phone call at, 7:30 at night. I'm just getting ready to leave. I'm tired. I'm going to go home. The phone rings, and I'm thinking, who is calling the principal at 7:30 at night? Oh, well, I'm not going to know unless I answer the phone. So I pick it up, and it's a young man who wants a letter of reference. And, would I write him a letter of reference? And I said, well, I'm going to need some information. Who am I talking to? And he said, Muhammad. And I laughed because I said, you're going to have to give me more than that, because there were probably 40 students named Muhammad. And then when you add in the parents and everybody else, there could be like 150 Muhammads. And he said, Muhammad of the split head.
It's wonderful, how these incidents happen. And then years later, they come back and there's a charm to them, isn't there?
I think so, yeah. And what I like about the stories, and this hasn't been proven to me yet, I don't describe the classrooms, I don't describe the schools very much, because everyone's been to school. Everyone knows what a classroom looks like. Everyone knows what a gymnasium looks like and an auditorium. So there's no point in me explaining to describing it, because I want the reader to be in their own classroom, their own gymnasium at the time. I had two teachers who got married when I was an elementary student. One, thank you for not asking me to read about, her real name was Mademoiselle de Groot, and I had a horrible crush on Mademoiselle de Groot. I think most boys did. She was a stunner, and she became Madame Nielsen. But I changed that in the book a little bit. The other teacher who got married was Miss Hewlett, and she became Mrs. Carey. And I didn't have a crush on Miss Hewlett, but I thought the world of her. She was a wonderful teacher. And I think all the boys in class, all the students in class liked Miss Hewlett and were quite happy when she, told us she was going to get married. And so you want me to read from?
Now Miss Johnson.
Now Miss Johnson, who was really Miss Hewlett. Now Miss Johnson was another matter. I really liked her. We all did, I think. I didn't take a poll or anything, but all my friends agreed that Miss Johnson was a fine teacher, pretty cool for an older person, and definitely deserving of happiness in her private, out-of-school life. By grade 4, we all knew that our teachers had lives outside of school. We'd seen many of them in the grocery store, for example, and after asking our parents about it, we were assured that they also ate food. Our teachers went to the movies too. Miss Johnson may have even seen The Graduate, but she never talked to us about it. So I liked Miss Johnson, but I didn't have a crush on her. I was 8, I think, or maybe 9, depending on when she got married. I don't recall the exact month she was married. What I do remember is that she invited us, her class, to the ceremony. This was amazing. I'd never been to a real wedding, having only seen a few on TV and seen pictures in the paper. I ran home to tell my mother after school. She expressed incredulity. She didn't actually invite you. Yes, she did. She invited all of us. She said it would be really nice if some of you could be there. It would make the day extra special for us, she said. So my mother called the school and spoke to Miss Johnson. Yes, she had asked us to attend the service if we'd like. My mother called a few of the other parents. Some thought it a beautiful gesture. Some, my mother included, said it wasn't the smartest thing to do. Both views, as things turned out, were correct. Matthew Parker and I decided that we'd go together. The church Miss Johnson was getting married in was downtown, and by grade 4, we both knew how to get there. We went by this church on the bus on the way to the movies. You know, Matt said to me on the way home after school, there's a moment in the service when Miss Johnson kisses the guy who becomes her husband. Yeah, I know. We don't have to watch that, though. Can you imagine kissing anyone in public like that? I mean, everybody's looking at you. I bet you want to kiss Linda like that, said Matthew. Shut up, I responded. That's how old we were.
Sounds like 8.
That's 8.
Very briefly, because time just gets away from us, these stories are fabulous, and I know people will enjoy them so much, but you've got a follow-up.
Yep. And it's
a book 2.
Book 2. And I mentioned Elver Peruzzo earlier. He's going to be angry with me for this. I call the second volume the Principal Chronicles 2 TWO/2 TOO/2 Roman numeral 2/ as well. And when I told Elver the title, he said, explain. And I said, well, it's a multiple choice question, and all the answers are correct. He said, no one's going to understand that. And so far, everybody has.
That's terrific. So where can people buy your books? Where can we get them?
I love saying this. Wherever fine books are sold. It's at both chapters. It's at Biblioasis. It's at, I was going to say Turns and Tales, but yeah, I guess it is still at Turns and Tales in Chatham. It's also at Juniper. It's at Storytellers. It's at the River Bookshop in Amherstburg. I forgot about that.
Indeed, wherever fine
books are sold.
Congratulations on it. As I said, it's a terrific read.
Thank you.
And I know all ages would enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for another edition of Scribes and Songsters. It really does go far too quickly. Many thanks to our guest, David Garlick. Check out his book, The Principal Chronicles. And thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Brian Sweet and technical producer and editor Gary Glass. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.